Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey. We're about to get very, very nerdy with my favorite books of this year. So 2018 has been an incredible reading year for me. I read 80 something books out of my goal of 30 that I kept bumping up and finally gave up at 60, so I'll take that as a real big win. So today I've compiled a list of the top 18 books that I read in 2018. This list was a lot harder to make than I thought it was going to be. There were some books that I knew for sure was going to be on it because I had very strong feelings about it. But I loved a lot of books. I can't remember giving a book like maybe one a 2-star, maybe. Everything else was pretty much a 3 and up. So I will not go into what these books are about because I have talked about every single one of them before, but I will leave a list of all of my wrap-ups down below if you would like to learn more about some of these books. For the first time, these are actually going to be in order, so there is a plan to the madness today. But let's just get in because I have quite a stack going over here. So number 18 that I read this year that was my favorite is Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. This is a graphic novel that I remember reading for, I believe it was the Newt readathon, but it was definitely one of the magical readathons. And I listened to the audiobook while I was reading this because I've never listened to a graphic novel audiobook before, and I thought it was really interesting that they had that. So I started listening and following along, and it was an amazing experience. I loved listening to it and I loved reading it at the same time just because it gave it this like very well-rounded experience, because you were looking at the art and you're getting the original context, but you're also getting a full cast recording of it, and it was just really cool. There were sound effects and everything, and it just made it feel like I was there. This is just a really good book, and the art in this is amazing, and I just love the story behind it. Number 17 on this list is Persuasion by Jane Austen. So this is one that I believe I read like super early on at the beginning of the year, and it was definitely one of my favorite Jane Austen stories. I absolutely adore Persuasion. It's that one and Pride and Prejudice are kind of tied for first at this point. It was my very first audiobook of the year, but I honestly didn't even get into audiobooks until this year. And it was really cool because I already knew the story obviously, but it was really interesting to go back in because even your favorite books, if you read them multiple times, there are things in them that you don't realize until you listen to it or you read it about 10 million times. But I absolutely adore Persuasion. I just love the story so much, and I said it before, my absolute favorite thing that Jane Austen has ever written is the love letter that Captain Wentworth sends Anne in the end, and I have a lot of feels. The 16th book that is my favorite in 2018 is 3 Dark Crowns by Kendara Blake. It was so much fun. I dived into it, and the first half was a little hard to get into, I will admit that. But once I got into it, it was amazing. I enjoyed my time. I was with family, and I couldn't put it down. And it's family I haven't seen in years, so it was bad. I should have put it down, but I didn't. That's how much I liked it. The way it was written was really, really cool, and I loved the world building, and it's just a great world, and I loved diving into it. Number 15 on this list is The Potato Peel Pie Society. It's written all in letters, and my favorite thing about this, and I know I've raved about this before, is that it's written by 2 people, but there's about 15 different characters in the story, and they all write letters, but somehow their voices are so different. So even if you don't know who's writing the letter, you know within seconds just because of the way it's written. It's just, how can someone create 17 characters like that and be able to write so perfectly from their point of view and not have it confused with others? I don't understand. It was so cool. So number 14 this year is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. Y'all, I don't know why I waited so long, but I waited so long, and that was a mistake. Everyone has been raving about this book, and I understand why. It is so good. There's a lot of world building, and it is quite a chunky book, so that was very intimidating. But being a debut novel, I don't even fathom how much of a good writer Tomi Adeyemi is if this is her debut novel. I didn't think I would be connected to the characters in this book as much as I was. I just loved it. It is such a good book, and it definitely deserves all of the hype that it's getting, at least in my opinion. Number 13 on this list is also a first in a series, but I'm using it to represent the rest of the series, or at least the first two that I read, and that is Illuminae, the first in the Illuminae files by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This, I think, is probably the first book this year that introduced me to sci-fi. I've said many a time that I just am not a huge sci-fi fan, but because this was written in such a different format, I thought I would give it a go from the library, because if I didn't like it, I could just send it back. Y'all, I cared within a lot more pages than I thought I would. I had really no idea what I was getting myself into, and I was really scared because it's told in a file format that I wasn't going to be able to connect with some of the characters. That is some things that I had heard from people who had done reviews that could be a problem, and so I was a little bit scared about that. But I had no problem doing that. It was really fast to get through. There's so much that happens in this big book. Same with the second one, and it just opened my eyes to sci-fi. I think a lot of my favorites this year, or at least a lot of the most surprising reads this year for me, were sci-fi, and I think I like sci-fi now, and I'm totally okay with that. So number 12 on this list is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is the book that I got in my January Owl Crate, and I had never heard of this. I knew of Holly Black, I knew of the author, but I hadn't really heard any of the hype going around this because I had literally just started this channel. I just loved it. I just randomly picked it up one day because I thought I would give it a go, and I cared more than I thought I would, and along the lines of Three Dark Crowns, it took me a little while to get into this. This was kind of my introduction to this year's YA a little bit, so I definitely enjoyed it, and I cannot wait to get the second one in this series. Number 11 on this list is The Darkest Minds by Alexander Bracken. This one also kind of represents the rest of the series because I fell in love with this series so much. I'm not a huge dystopian, I wouldn't say dystopian fan, but I don't read a lot of dystopian very much just because it all kind of feels the same, at least to me, and so I didn't pick it up, but the movie was coming out and I found the audiobook online, so I thought, you know, I'll just give it a go, and fell head over heels in love with this world, with this cast of characters, with so much about this story that it's now one of my favorite books. It just made me feel good when I was reading it, and it gave me all of the feelings. Like, if a book can make you mad and upset and stressed and frustrated but still love it, it's a good book. That's a good, well-written book. So number 10 on this list is To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. I definitely adored this book. It was super cute, and I had a feeling I would like it before I went into it, but I just never got around to it. I had the entire series and I just never got around to reading it, and then one day I just picked it up and I said, you know what, I'm gonna give it a shot, and breezed through the first half of this book in like no time flat. I loved the story behind it. I loved the whole writing letters and that causing chaos. Like that idea just is so interesting to me. I was so glad that I finally got around to reading this. So number 9 on this list is The Bells by Danielle Clayton. I love the world building. It's such a unique idea about basically testing beauty and what it really means and what is true beauty, and I think that's really important for a lot of people, especially a lot of girls growing up who would be reading this right now and having that problem in their everyday life. I think it's really important, and she put it in a very unique story and a very unique world, but still honing down on that distinct message. So number 8 on this list is Autobiography by Christina Lauren. I have never read anything by Christina Lauren until I read this book. Y'all, it was so good. I couldn't put it down. I honestly totally bought this because the cover was absolutely gorgeous, and then when I read what it was about, I thought that was super important and I needed to read that. But it's so cute and it's such a great take, and it's just really good, and they do hit on hard topics of LGBTQ rights in the Mormon Church and things of that nature, but I think it's handled in a really well written way in this book, and I think it's such an important book for that purpose, and I adored it, and the love story is super, super, super cute, and it made me happy. I have lots of tabs, so when I have lots of tabs, you know a book's good. Number 7 on this list is Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. I bet you guys were just waiting until this popped up because we all know it was going to be on this list. I devoured this book in one day. It is such a good story. It is cute. It gives you all of the feels, and it's just every time I pick it up, I just want to read it again. I cannot rave about this enough. And number 6 on this list is Heart of Iron by Ashley Poston. I bet you guys are tired of me raving about this book because I've talked about it quite a lot. So this is one that I got earlier in the spring from Owl Crate, and literally the only thing I knew about it was that it was an Anastasia retelling. Set in space. I didn't know it was set in space. I do love the story of Anastasia, so I had a feeling I might like it, but I didn't really know I would love it to the extent that I do. I couldn't stop reading. I would come home from work and put off things that I should be doing to read this book because it was that good. Okay, we only have the top 5 left, but before I go into what my favorite books of the year were, I have a few honorable mentions. They are Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee, The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies by Jane Austen and Seth Grahame-Smith, Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick, and finally, The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand. So without further ado, let's go into my top 5 books. So number 5 is To Kill a Kingdom by Alexander Christo. This is a Little Mermaid retelling. I love The Little Mermaid. It was one of my favorite Disney movies when I was growing up, and it still holds a very special place in my heart. So kind of any retelling that has to do with it, I'm probably gonna end up reading. But this one is so good. The world is written so incredibly well. The romance that takes place in this book is crazy believable. At least it is to me. It's not kind of, there's no moments of, oh, it's you. Like epiphany moments that are not so believable. This one, it felt very real. Book number 4 on this list is The Jane Austen Project by Kathleen A. Flynn. It's basically about going back in time and meeting Jane Austen. I would love to do that. I enjoyed it so much, but I didn't realize how much I enjoyed it until it was over. I was a little skeptical going into it, but it was so good, and I've had it for years, and I kept putting it off because I was afraid I wasn't going to like it as much as I wanted to, but I do not have to worry about that because I did. Book number 3 on this list is When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon. I had a feeling I was going to like this when I went into it because it sounded like a very cute romance rom-com type book, and boy was it. It was, there was so much about this that I really liked. I loved their relationship throughout the entire thing. I loved where it ended. I loved them and their differences that made them like perfect for each other. I went out and I found an ebook version of this because I needed this on me at all times so I could read it when I didn't actually have a physical book with me. It was that good. It was such a cute story and I loved it. The second book on this list is Yesterday I Was the Moon by Noor Unar. Now this is a book of poetry that I believe I read in August, I think. It was for one of the readathons. I hadn't read poetry in a very long time until this book, and I honestly just randomly picked it up at like Target or something because I needed a book that was a shorter book for one of the challenges. I didn't know I would relate to almost every single thing in this book. Like I can't even show you how many tabs I've got going on in this book because I wanted to tab almost everything. That's how much this book affected me. I'm just really grateful that something in the universe told me to get this because it just affected me so much and I absolutely adored it. Okay, we've made it to number 1. The number 1 book that I read this year is If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. I have raved about this book on my channel this year, and it didn't come out this year. It's been out for a couple years, I think. It came out in 2016. I'd heard about it and I knew what it was about, but I never just got around to picking it up. And I saw it in the library one day and I said, you know what, I'm going to give that book a chance because I think it deserves it and I think it's an important topic. Well, it was very good, and all I wanted to do was read this book. There was so much good quality topics, I guess, that was in this book, and I personally hadn't read anything where the main character was transgender, so watching her story was just amazing, and I loved that it was written with flashbacks in it, so you would get to see our main character as a boy and thinking about transitioning. There was a lot of hard topics in it, including, you know, bullying and being scared of that happening again, and talking to her dad, they'd never really had that conversation before, and flashbacks with her mom, and it was such a well-told story, and I think it's one that everyone should read. I also find it really interesting that it's also an own voice story, and even the model on the cover is transgender, so it feels like it comes from a very true and real place. I think that's what made it so good and so important to tell. Okay, well, that was a lot of books to get through, but we've made it. So thank you guys so much for sticking with me through all of these books, and honestly through this entire year. This has been my first year on BookTube. It's been an amazing year, and I appreciate every single one of you guys for sticking with me this year and finding the things that I say slightly interesting that you want to watch. So thank you, and I appreciate every single one of you. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you want to be part of this awesome family we've got going on here. And that is it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next year. Bye.